And there again, generally speaking, they think of markets in and around their own region and at the most within India. But that's not the way to grow. I mean, one has to look at how are we placed globally. That is something which is lacking. Our competitors were people who had their own designs, but we decided to compete, not with a borrowed design. We had already put in place in Chennai. In fact, we had a shipbuilding design house where we design whether we get the order or not, but we keep designing things for that. And we designed these boats. And sure enough, we bagged the order. So I fully substantiate the fact that you have to export if you want to understand where you stand. And what I've learned over the years, hard way, is being safe is being competitive. That's an international quality rating system. Now that helped us to look at our own operations from a globally challenging perspective. The only person I will say should not be rotated is a doctor because nobody else can fulfill his role.
So contract management is all about, one part is how do I protect myself. The other is going out of the way and saying what is the right for the customer. And then to build that, and that's when customer sees you in a different light. Hello everyone, welcome to Counterpoint podcast from Vector Consulting Group, where we discuss chronic unresolved problems of organizations, and at times we take the industry as a whole. Today we're going to discuss the industry which is called as engineering to order industry, or let's say the equipment manufacturing industries. Now if you look at this industry and look at the companies out there, you'll find out that about 70 to 80% of the companies are in that sub 500 crores. In fact, many below 200 crores. And there are only a handful of them which have made it big. And the companies which stay small for a very, very long time. Now, why is this case? Why do companies, struggle to evolve to the bigger league? And to discuss this topic, we have with us Mr. Kotwal, MVK, as he is fondly called. He was the whole-time director on the board of L&T. He led heavy engineering division of L&T, one of the equipment manufacturing major. And to give you the story of heavy engineering company, it started off as a maker of simplified, simple equipments for the dairy industry. And now, you know what? They produce nuclear power submarines. They make complicated equipments for the fertilizer industry, for the petroleum industry. How did they evolve into being such a small player into something very big? Mr. Kotwal has been part of this journey. He's also not just a technocrat. 40 years in L&T, he's a big technocrat out there. Part of various advisory board committees of the government. He is part of the Vijay Kelkar Committee on Defense, National Aeronautics Advisory Group Committee for the Government of India, and he's also been recognized as one of the top business leaders of the country. He has won the award as a Business Leader of the Year multiple times. And let's hear from him, how did L&T evolve into, L&T Heavy Engineering particularly evolve into the big league? Welcome, Mr. Kotwal. So if I look at your growth story, fantastic growth story, and you're talking about reinventing the company multiple times. But when you look at the engineering industry right now, and the kind of companies out there, many of them have stayed small. So if you could, say what are they missing? What is that they're struggling with? Why are they small?
See, one thing is, I would call it a broader weakness of India as such. We tend to follow things rather than lead in various areas. That's the general trend. I mean, when anyone puts up an industry, he would say, okay, which are the other people in the field and how do I catch up? This catching up is a very dangerous thing. We don't think of how we lead. And that stems from the fact that probably, and this is my opinion, that we've been taught to follow, to not challenge. We've been taught to follow what has been taught to us by our elders, which is valuable certainly, but it changes the whole picture. Now, when companies put up investments, their first thing is, okay, where is the market? And there again, Generally speaking, they think of markets in and around their own region and at the most within India. But that's not the way to grow. I mean, one has to look at how are we placed globally. Once you change that mindset, open up your mind, I'm sure, I mean, talents are in abundance, but it's that kind of urge to excel on a global scale. That is something which is lacking, I would say. Changing now, but still it is lacking.
So, we do a lot of work of consulting to this company. We see two kinds of companies. There are companies which have their proprietary design, but they operate in such a small segment within the country that they don't cross this 300, 400 crores. They stay small, making specialized kind of machinery. And then there are these, what we call as build to print, like somebody else is designing, but they struggle that after a point of time, it becomes a typical tonnage business, right? How much tons and initial entry is okay, but after some time your overheads go up and then you are unviable, then somebody else enters. Now, how do I, for these two kinds of companies, what is your take? How do they, break out and get into that big league?
I have a very high regard for the niche players who have their own design. Because let me tell you, finally, unless you own the design and the IP, you are not really masters of your product. And we have seen this in various dimensions. I mean, you can start small with a small gadget, but you look at even major process houses, the Chevrons of the world or ExxonMobil, they have process know-how. They are the basic designers of the process and following that design of the equipment. Now, they really control the market in that sense. They decide who are the manufacturers who will be capable of making our own, say, processes or equipment for those processes, and that's how it starts off. So unless you have control on the basic design, you don't have control on your total product. And once you have that control on product, you can decide where that should be manufactured. Not necessarily so in India, it could be anywhere in the world. And that's how you get the best. So and the people who have that technology, unfortunately, they have sort of closeted themselves into a kind of situation where they say, okay, we must protect our technology. And therefore, they don't have that urge to really go abroad and find out what is happening, and they sort of get outdated quite soon because they're so secluded in their own vision of their own technology or engineering process they have developed. I mean, I know several small people who have got wonderful ideas, they've done very good work, but they just don't move out to make it big, and this is the reason. Now, what one should do about it, basically, I think the best education is to export. It is only there that you are tested with the best in class in the world, and you are also, it's very clear as to which are the areas where you are reinventing the wheel. There is no harm at all in picking up from where the world has, which is reached, and then on build from there rather than starting from scratch. So, this tendency of going out and learning from people is vital for us, for our industry. The more and more exposure we get to what are the world-class players in those respective areas, the faster we will be.
So basically you're saying that when you are in India, you are kind of protected in some way and you're trying to be a player which is trying to take a market share. But the real learning of excellence comes is when you go out and start exports. And what about the companies which are, let's call them the build to print people who, make manufacturing is their core, detailed design manufacturing, supply is their forte. Now, how do they, and I'm sure HED did a lot of work at that space itself.
Continue to make a lot of build to print also.
Build to print as well. And despite being a build to print player, it could evolve and become much bigger, right? So what are the learnings there? Because each time, I remember you telling me that each time you got into a category that became irrelevant because somebody else entered and then you reinvented yourself. Now, that looks like a fascinating journey of evolution, killing yourself and then recreating it. How did you make that happen? And what is that the companies are really missing on this?
So here, actually, build to print is the necessary step one has to go through. You can't suddenly become, it has to be the necessary first step. However, there is a lot of learning you can do. You can learn about how to build out of a print, but you can also, on your own, start understanding why the print is made that way. Now, I'll give you an example. See, we, as you know, got into shipbuilding, first with a small yard in Hazira and then with a very, very large shipyard we have put up at Kotwal near Chennai. Now, that's a yard specialized for large vessels, especially defense and so on. Now, the thing is, we had a requirement for developing some Coast Guard vessels. Now, these are very high-speed boats, 45 knots and above. Now, they necessarily have to have aluminum hulls and twin water jet propulsion and so on. Now, this is something which had never been done in India. Our competitors were people who had their own designs, okay? But we decided to compete, not with a borrowed design. We had already put in place in Chennai, in fact, we had a shipbuilding design house where we design, whether we get the order or not, but we keep designing things for that. And we designed these boats. And sure enough, we bagged the order, and that product has gone on extremely well. Dozens of them have already been supplied. So it's now that we have understood how a twin jet propulsion should be done, and how it should be accommodated in a hull with the low weight and high speed kind of stuff, how to test the whole vessel. We understood the whole game. Now we are ready for the bigger things. So if we had not done that, we would have been, okay, wait for a design to come from Europe or US or whatever it is and make it as per that. So maybe we had to start that way, but we had to grow out of it quickly. And if you are able to grow out of it, the whole world is open for you.
I think that's a very interesting thought. As you're doing your running business, you're preparing for the future, creating that separate design team without any revenues, and then you'd always have struggle for engineers to supply your current orders, but you're taking the step of, no, let me set up another organization who are learning and trying to work for the future. I think that's something that many companies are missing, because you have your orders, then you are like, after your monthly plans, quarterly plans, and the day just gets over. Preparing for future and investing into new capabilities, I think that's a big deal.
In fact, you mentioned investment. Actually, if you look at it, people don't realize that it's not a very high cost that you have to go. You have to go into getting the right kind of people, and of course, the right kind of computer infrastructure which is needed. But it's not as if you're buying huge multi-crore machines and all that and preparing for them. You understand that you're preparing the soft part. And if you are ready with it, you can really work wonders. We did the same when we talked about the submarine also.
What I see in companies right now is the promoters themselves are so neck deep into just managing the shop floor or getting the dispatches out. They don't even have time to think about future. So I'm sure L&T would have gone through that phase of struggling for dispatches and all those things that happen. And how did you create that mental space to even think about future as a leader?
So one thing when I sort of look back at this particular question, what comes to mind is we have been fortunate that we have never been a family-owned organization, right? To that extent, it has always been a professionally managed company with professionals on the board. So that is one difference. I mean, when I have been, of course, on the board of a few family-managed organizations also, and what you said is absolutely right. Now, the thing is, anyone who is managing a company, if he or she thinks that all the decisions have to come from him or her, it's a limiting factor for the company. Whereas once you start saying that I will deal with certain strategic issues and leave the operations to people, whether it's a family managed or otherwise, I've seen success stories even in the family managed organizations, where they leave it to professionals to manage, and then they have time to look at this strategy, what directions the company should follow. But if you don't consciously do it, I'm afraid there is no easy solution. I mean, it's not possible to have. The second thing which has happened, which I'm sure people are realizing now, that things of the future are going to be so drastically different as compared to things of the past, that the same people who thought they had good control over the product and the business will find themselves at sea with the kind of technology, the changes that are occurring and the AI coming in and so on. So it's something which by force is now going to help them, or rather force them to hand over to people who can understand it better.
So one of the key thoughts that you're bringing onto the table here is that particularly the leadership layer, as the company is growing, because you get into the habit, because initially there are small set of people, you are doing everything, but as you're becoming bigger, it's very important to let go and start looking at future. But I want to touch upon the fact that as you are making a build to print, I know you have done a lot of work on the operational excellence part. And can you take us through that? What was the need of putting so much of efforts and into operational excellence?
Okay, this operational excellence, I would like to drill down a little further. See, basically in our kind of ETO business especially, I don't have the authority to talk about the mass production companies, but I am sure that such principles apply there. There is no single success you can relate to a single individual, right? So which means if you want to have a whole project getting done in time or a large product getting done in time and of the right quality, there are so many people who get involved. So the whole start of the process has to be with involving all people at all levels. So we had a very interesting program called TQM, of course all of you know, but basically it is involvement, employee involvement kind of a initiative and across the company, and we participated very willingly, and that is one. The second, when it goes down to actual manufacturing in our kind of industry, a huge role is played by what we call commonly as the blue collars, which is absolutely, I don't like to classify that way, but it is true that they are the people who actually convert your drawings into something real. Now, in most organizations, that segment is sort of treated as different from the so-called white-collared, and that is a tragedy, because when I talk of employee involvement, it has to include all those people. How to do it? Of course, various organizations can follow their own systems, but we found that the entire TQM process, if we extended, we were very successful. The second part we introduced was a Kaizen system. Now here there was a lot of learning from Japan, basically. I mean, there's a huge difference between the way Japan tackles manufacturing as compared to the Western US or Europe, even other countries there. Basically, Japanese have believed, and this they have imbibed and got in their bloodstream, that there is an involvement of people in any decision that's made. Sometimes, we get worked up that for a single decision, there are so many people who discuss with each other, and then only the decision comes out. And we ask for the leader, the chairman of the company, he'll be a person who will not show himself in the front, maybe. So basically, that whole system is different. We understood that system, we decided to practice it. Especially, we got a good chance at Hazira, where we were putting up a absolute brand new facility. So all the unlearnings we could do and learnings of new things. So Kaizen was a very good thing which you got. Now when it came to managing projects, and that is the kind of learning which I personally had, this is maybe after 30 years in manufacturing, and we thought that we were among the better manufacturers. Then we got into the next step as to how do we become world class. Everyone has his dream, we want to become world class. But then you don't know what you're going to do tomorrow to become world class. So to discover that, we had an agency, we actually got DNVGL, they had developed a very good program. That's an international quality rating system. Now that helped us to look at our own operations from a globally challenging perspective. Now that helped us in saying that, okay, where are the areas which are strong, weak, and we worked upon that. Then when we came to actually managing projects of various types, as you know, ETO means a lot of unknowns. There is nothing really known, there's so many things, and every product being different, customer being different, and the requirement being different. I mean, there's nothing which you can say is standard. So in that sense, how to manage projects and still do them on time. It's a very complex thing. We were not having a great performance in delivery, and that is when we start inventory is going up, delivery is not being met, and so on. And that's when we started thinking, but we couldn't suddenly implement it. But we got a great chance when we were making these reactors, nuclear reactors for the subsequent 500 megawatt reactors. There was some hold in the order, the material that supplied, but there was a hold up. So for maybe 4 or 5 years, there was nothing going on. And suddenly they woke up and said, now we want it very urgently. So that's when we got an opportunity that, okay, now this is something, we've heard about a goal, we had actually distributed amongst the seniors. And then they said, okay, let's try it on this project. Without any investment as such, but just changing the approach, we found remarkable results. We got the whole bonus for the first time. And that was a turning point that yes, this is an approach which succeeds. Then on, we built on it. We found CCPM as an excellent tool for managing projects, of course with modifications to suit our industry. But basically, the way of thinking is something which is quite it's a high potential kind of a.
I think a very interesting story, and on the learnings, I'm trying to relate the learnings for the companies who are listening out there, is the need to create, if you're built to print, create some kind of a competitive edge. And what you're saying is, you guys, operational excellence, which means delivering things on time, which is, by the way, is a rare thing for the industry because of the sheer complexity and the uncertainty involved. To have a process which is which ensures that the projects are delivered on time, and at the same time create more and more productive resources in the shop floor. That's also a focus for particularly the build to print companies to extract more. Now you touch upon the blue collar, and as I look at this industry, they look at this blue collar, and blue collar productivity is always a big topic. And how did you crack that puzzle? Because continually, if you look at these people, they say, okay, we have people, we are not getting best out of them. The touch time, the arcing time in the welding station is so low. We have got a lazy set of people. That's a viewpoint that's quite common out there. And also that is one of the reasons why people don't expand. Because who's going to take a headache of 100 more people, 200 more people, bigger organization, bigger set of people, and all the headache out there. So how did you manage the blue collar? How do you make them part of the organization? How do you get productivity from them?
Yeah, so here it starts with understanding the problem really. The superficial things of they and us, and they waste time and we are very efficient, is a complete falsehood. When you talk about productivity, what is measured, or the method that is measured for the blue collar people, I would like to ask, where are the measures for management productivity? And if managerial productivity is measured, the ratios with the comparable best in class in the world, I think will be worse than what we have on the so-called blue collar.
You're sounding like a union leader now. But yeah, that's the...
So what is wrong with being a union leader? What I'm asking is,
we always talk about...
They are all resources, finally, right?
Absolutely.
Now, to just give you an idea of just the total number. Now, here again, learning has to come from outside also. So it doesn't happen from within. So I did make it a practice that whenever there are senior customers coming in for a visit, normally what happens is they always are full of praise. Normally you would not find a person who's going to criticize you on your face. They will say, okay, this is a great company and very good people and excellent facilities and all that, and they go back. But what they go back with need not necessarily be only those things, right? So if you dig around and find out, make a lot of effort, then they come out with those things. So I used to hear the praises. I said, that's fine. It's nice of you to have pointed out, but can you tell us what you did not find quite okay? So 2 or 3 different inputs I got from customers which are very important. One from a Japanese customer. Now they were fortunately in an industry which was similar to what we were in heavy engineering at the time, making pressure vessels and heat exchangers and large things. So, and their output was more or less similar, and it was a coincidence, maybe the size of the workshops were also similar. Okay. So I asked this gentleman, I said, you have seen our workshop? He said, yeah, very good, very good. I said, then what is not right? He just made one remark that, there are just too many people walking around. So I said, too many? See, we always think, internally we are L&T, and therefore, so then I asked him, how many people do you have in your workshop? So with the Japanese, you have a lot of patience to come out with the right answer in numbers. So then he thought and all that, and then said 160. So I said, okay, but that's the people in the workshop, no? What about the design offices and query? Yes, total. Yeah. Then I said, but what about, the people who do purchasing everything. Then he got irritated. He says, total, including me down there, total 160. Now, I found it unbelievable because at that time we had 1100 people. I'm not ashamed of it.
1100.
So now, so if you now start thinking, oh, that's because Japanese have a lot of automation, and amazingly, actually they have less automation, at least in some of the areas, than what we have. The simple reason being, their investments are pretty old, right? And we may have invested in those similar machines much later. So we've got more modern machines. So we can't complain about that. Then we talk about the usual culture and blah, blah, blah. But finally, if you want to look at this gap, it's a total number. So that gives you an input. Another such input I got from a person in Singapore about safety. You know, in those days, I'm talking about some decades back, our safety standards used to be pathetic. Today, at least by Indian standards, they are quite good. So, I asked them the same thing. What did you not find okay? People are not wearing helmets. In those days, even helmets in that. So I gave my usual Indian answer. Oh, we are in a humid and hot place, and people find it difficult. Welders have to work in a hot area. So he just smiled and said, where do you think I come from? I am on the equator, so now what more you? So basically, these inputs go into self-correction. Then we looked at our safety standards and saw that because traditionally it is understood that being safe is being expensive. And what I have learned over the years, hard way, is being safe is being competitive because you can save money by being. So these inputs go back in. Now coming to your question on the involvement of the so-called blue collar, we have still a long way to go, but it's a journey. And Kaizen helped a lot in that. Because when you talk about Kaizen, you are talking about improvements made, not suggestions. Okay? So it's implemented improvements. The other condition is that the improvement should be minimal in cost. It should cost not more than 100 rupees. How do you make an improvement with 100 rupees?
And that to implement it.
Implemented. So then you start thinking at what the Japanese call the seed stage. Anything which goes wrong, when it is a seed, it can be controlled with 100 rupees. And when you wait for it to the flower stage, it may cost millions of rupees. Suggestion scheme tackles the other part. You earn a lot of money by making a suggestion which will save, say, 20% you get, and it's big money. They start the other way around. But in the seed stage, involvement of the so-called blue-collared is easily possible. If you involve entire organization in it and say that what are we going to recognize? We don't give monetary rewards, but recognition is to the person who gives the maximum number of those seed stage improvements. So we put up a very elaborate system. Every improvement which comes is analyzed by a group and said, is it a seed stage or a stem or a flower stage? Seed stage gets maximum numbers. If you involve other people in it, you get maximum numbers. So that's the kind of thing. So it involves the whole group. Then there is no difference between whether it's a blue collar, because the groups used to be somebody from office would make a suggestion, but the improvement or implementation is done by somebody here. So that creates a lot of teamwork. So these are a few things which can help. Even when talking about recognitions, I mean, typically it is in most organizations to invite the person and give him in the presence of, and take a lot of photographs and all that. We changed all that. We said, if you want to change it, let us change it so that the family also gets involved. Rather than giving him or her an award in the company, why not go to the house, sir, and give that little award there? Award means it's basically some recognition on flowers and sweets. So that's it. No money.
Nothing monetary.
Nothing. No. Because in the Japanese system, they say you should never give monetary rewards because it's a corrupting influence. Whereas if you give recognition, it actually serves the purpose better than monetary rewards.
And it's motivating. You are connecting that I'm doing something which is for a bigger purpose. I think that's more motivating.
So all these initiatives do help. I'm not saying we have solved it 100%, but yes, we have largely.
I think it's the auto industry has done, Maruti has done a lot of in this space, but interesting to know a heavy engineering company doing that at that level. Just picking up from that point that you talked about, that the number of people in the shop floor who are involved in doing a job, ultimately the real constraint is the skill, right? The level of skill that you're applying to the job. And if you are able to do more from existing, also that helps, particularly the build-to-print companies, reduce their costs over time and have that more breathing space to survive till somebody new gets in. Now, so let's say you are having a huge labor force, right? And how did you try to reduce the efforts on the jobs, and how did you go about that part of the journey?
So
when you are doing that, you are also releasing capacity, right? So there is this thing of what do you do with those people? So how do you manage this?
See, actually in any organization there are two kinds of problems. One which are chronic, which even the management has sort of reconciled to the fact that yes, this will happen. And there are some which keep on coming up, cropping up, which one cannot foresee. But if you look at that chronic kind of things, if you say that the best of engineers will solve the problem, or the most brilliant people, education-wise, then there is a big mistake one is making. So we had a lot of improvement teams. You can call them any name, like Pragati groups or whatever it is. But essentially, it again involves all the people. A welder working day in and day out in welding, he knows exactly what is wrong with that operation or the design of that. But he will never say it because the designer is designed, he is only a person who is converting that. But if we involve in that, and that group has got somebody from design, somebody from procurement, and somebody from the actual workman who is doing it, then you get a different kind of input. And you get a clue which gives you a brilliant idea. Now, I mean, I have quoted this example a number of places that at one time we were making some heat exchangers, very complex heat exchangers for the nuclear power plant. They're called steam generators. They're very complex, a lot of good materials used, etc. But we had one heat exchanger, and that heat exchanger defied us for years, not months. Because in the final testing, when we were doing our helium test to check out for very, very minor leaks if there are any, it used to be that you pressurize one side, the other side shows a leak. When you pressurize that side, the second doesn't show a leak. It went on, and it was puzzling all of us. And a lot of people applied their minds, and finally we said, just leave it aside. We'll solve it sometime later, and we took on something else. But this kept bothering me that this heat exchanger is lying outside. It's fully produced thing, but it has got this problem. So we said, hey, let us try again. So this is about 3 years afterwards, it was kept outside. We brought it in again, and then we started looking at it. And that time I remember one person who, I mean, you would never have imagined that he could have thought of this kind of solution, but he gave a clue. He said, you'll never find this leak. And he gave a certain explanation, which was an outstanding explanation. And we said, okay, if this is the case, let us do a test to find out. And we found that exactly that was the problem. And we solved it. My point is that it is absolutely wrong to think that just because you may be a highly qualified engineer or whatever, that you are the best equipped to solve problems. You may have solutions which others cannot, and therefore you have to give your benefit of your education. But the solution can come from anyone. And like Khalil Gibran says, every worm has a point of view. I mean, it is like that. You have to listen to people, respect them, and I'm sure the best will come out.
What do you do with the released capacity? Like you keep on doing productivity improvements, and then you're saying, okay, instead of, let's say, 3 welders, I'm now using 2 welders. That's good for the job. The other welder is available for another job. But at times, people have a fear that this release capacity, you might cut it off because of the cost pressures.
Yeah, so this stems from the fact that we think the demand is limited. Why we think so? Because we have got a certain product and we have, let's say, stretched its demand potential, whatever it is, or rather saturated the demand. But then why are we not thinking of adjacencies? That if we can do this, we can also do something else, which is not exactly this kind of product, but an adjacency to it. Once you start looking at that, the world opens up, then there are kind of new dimensions opening up, new kinds of businesses you can introduce. But if we get stuck that I am a manufacturer of heat exchangers and I shall remain for my life a manufacturer of heat exchangers, and that too limited by the weight and size of my workshop,
then somebody will eat you up within
but
no
the
time.
very definition of heat exchangers can stretch from heat exchangers required for aerospace. We're using the most exotic materials, they're extremely difficult to make and therefore quite expensive with very few competitors in the field, to run-of-the-mill heat exchanger, which is just, it goes on and there's so many people in the field. So once you start opening a mind to those adjacencies, there's a treasure out there. And that is something which we need to continuously do.
I remember you sharing with me that particularly in Powai, when you found out that you want to get out of a particular business, you had this excess talented pool of the best of welders. L&T always had the best of welders. And you talked about let's get into MRO as a...
MRU, yeah. It's maintenance, repairs and upgradation. MRU.
And that's the example of...
Yeah, now that again as a suggestion, actually it is not as if one doesn't have to think about all these things yourself, but you have to keep open dialogue. And we got it from one of our customers. I mean, when we asked that, okay, you have seen our skills, you have seen our capabilities. Then he pointed out that, look, have you looked at this whole field? So we said, what, maintenance? We are doing manufacturing. Maintenance as a classification is different. So then we started looking at it, maintenance, what does it really mean? Who are the people who do the maintenance? They are the same skilled fitters, or is a special, because in refineries, there are some materials which are very difficult to weld. You need people who have understood metallurgy and who have understood welding. Now, it's a close cousin of manufacturing, if you look at it in that sense. But if you look at it as, oh, we are not people who are on like maintenance, we are people who are manufacturing, then you will not come to that. Once you started digging a little further, then you found, yes, like refineries in petrochemical industries, Middle East, there are a lot of people, once there's a problem, they need specialists. They can't give this to just any Tom, Dick and Harry and come, okay, why don't you repair? Because you can have a real problem. So we need people who understand that. Here are the people who understand it. Now in Powai, typically because we have changed our whole product mix, because we moved out manufacturing mainly to Hazira and others. And Powai is therefore a different kind of a place. But those skilled people are very valuable. So that group was trained and then given some opportunities, and they're doing a wonderful job.
I think that's the evolution that you guys went into. Get into a product, even if it's built to print,
exactly.
Try to get the productivity, do delivery. After a point, you know that you will exit from this product.
And then
think about the future, have those design team thinking about it and release the capacity, try to look at adjacencies and
absolutely.
Then
because
go.
First presumption is that...
And nowhere did you face a issue of turnover going down while you are making these big transitions of, changing
There are ups and downs. I am not saying that we had a very steady growth, but, one thing fortunate, L&T as a whole is a conglomerate. So it doesn't depend on one kind of business. So one is doing not so good, there is another industry which makes up, and that's one advantage of a conglomerate. There are several other people who say that there are disadvantages. That's true. But having said that, there's a big advantage here. Similarly, within heavy engineering, we had a lot of different products. As you said, for the process industry, we make some of the largest reactors in the world, the largest heat exchangers in the world. Competition only comes from one or two companies globally, because nobody else is able to manage that. That is the kind of product we have on one side. But we also have the tiniest products, like we make hinge mechanisms. You'll not believe it. We used to make hinge mechanisms for satellites. A satellite has to be the lightest possible kind of a thing. And you can imagine spring-loaded hinges for that, very micro precision. So that, and some of the largest reactors weighing 3,000 tons and so on. So we had this mix. That doesn't mean you can today switch from one to the other tomorrow, but the human mind is very versatile. Similarly, everyone in the organization, if they are given a chance, it's not, in fact, that is the strength of India. I always look at it compared to some of the best in class. They have many people who are skilled in their job, but they have blinkers, that they are specialists. Okay, it's good to have a few specialists, necessary to have. But if everyone starts looking at himself as a specialist, then you are putting constraints around yourself. You can retrain people, you can have job rotation, so many things which can help. And that's how you can grow.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that takes us to the next topic. If I look at these small companies, you will find out that ultimately there are few people who become bottlenecks. And why? Because everybody is scared. This guy is design guy, this guy is manufacturing guy. If I shift him out the entire thing will fall like a pack of cards. And I want you to talk about it with the audience, particularly when there is so much of dearth of talent. You can't get this kind of talent. It's a lot of technology, managerial skills, so many things are required, right? You just can't get this skill from outside. How did you manage this? Because how did you prevent people from becoming bottleneck and become the barrier to growth of the company?
Yeah, so if you look at it in a very broad sense, a human being has got his own brain and he has full ownership for that. Nobody can do anything about it. Having said that, the brains are very versatile. I mean, each one of us will look at what we were and what we are, how many different things we have done in our life. The same thing applies to industry. It does not mean that a person should be typecast into something stereotyped that here is a person who will do welding all his life, here is a great specialist in metallurgy who will do metallurgy all his life, and then another person who is maybe a chemical engineer. It is true that they have got specialized knowledge, and that is also valuable. It is not to be lost. But I can give you so many examples where we had a top-class metallurgist, and he was doing exceedingly well as a metallurgist. Not that he was doing poorly in that. But we thought that, okay, this person, how long is he going to remain a metallurgist? Okay. So, first of all, he himself was not all that ready to move. But sort of, I cajoled him that, okay, why don't you try this? Why don't you start looking at the workshops? What workshops? Shift management, unions and all that, never managed that. But he became one of our best manufacturing people. He took leadership positions later on, he became, now is retired. But basically what I'm saying is, a top-class metallurgist becoming a workshop manager and later on taking over the whole thing, it makes a big difference. Now when he looks at what is going on, he looks at it with the eyes of a metallurgist. He can see that, okay, the person who is doing is not preheating properly, not the right temperature, the weld would crack or there could be defects. So he adds value. At the same time, he's learning so many skills. Now, if you adopt that kind of an approach, you must preempt these kind of bottlenecks coming up.
So I think what you did is this job rotation, which is, I think, very brave of you to do it in an engineering industry where people say, okay, I dare not move, something will go wrong. But you went out of the way, and this is like a very interesting example where you're saying, okay, your time is over, please move to the other department. And I think that's really the way you build those.
What I used to say in the company, the only person I will say should not be rotated is a doctor. Because nobody else can fulfill his role with the two specialists. But other than those one or two areas, I think all people are versatile, they can be trained. And yes, I am not saying that specialists are not required. But the same specialist becomes better at his own specialty if he is given an input about, let's say, a welding engineer becomes a better welding engineer if he has understood how manufacturing is done and where are the constraints. What are the problems a welder faces when he is working at 100, 200 degrees centigrade temperature around him and welding. So then he designs something better. So that is the all-round thing.
That is also something that the companies are not doing, and because of which they're always waiting to the last moment and the guy leaves and suddenly you're again searching for one more guy, and typically guy is from L&T, by the way. Because what you did is create these kind of people for the industry. You know, they say HLL is known for producing managers for the other companies, but I think L&T is known for creating talent for the industry as a whole.
But there is one more aspect which I want to bring out. See, more and more when you introduce automation, less and less you're depending on that particular so-called experience and skill, right? So if you want to introduce automation with the latest kind of methods of laser welding or whatever, EB welding, whatever, you need people with obviously a different mindset. Okay, to that extent, the very raw person who just come out of, just after some, we have got certain areas where we employ diploma engineers who are operating machines. The reason is that they bring to that a different level. Now they will easily accept automation of a very high level and also give some inputs. The more important thing is nothing ever is right all the time. And first time in many places, they will report back if something irregular is happening. And imagine a very experienced welder doing automation. If he thinks something, he will try and say, okay, I'll manage it. But then he's putting the problem under the carpet and it will not. So receptivity for automation. So that's another area where you will find that you don't need those kind of specialists which you needed at one time, but you need people with open minds. Now, same skilled welders can become excellent training people for these youngsters who come in. They can. We had a welding school where engineers who come, the first few weeks they spend with hands-on training, and they are taught by whom? By experienced welders. So that kind of a thing, which
is a very interesting thing of how do you create cross-functional capabilities by job rotation, and at the same time create a churn by introducing this kind of automation so that your skill dependence comes down and you're using these people to even train. I think that's what is missing, that and that people are scared about making any kind of a change.
No,
right? And you were talking about churning this to...
No, because the other thing which I have definitely come to the conclusion is, when you want to make a change, when you're wanting to move a person who's doing extremely well in his own area, to move him out, which is the biggest resistance? Apart from that, individual may have some hesitation, nervousness. Biggest resistance from his boss.
For his boss, absolutely.
Because you're taking my best man and you're depriving me of him and all that and giving me somebody else. So we had to do a little bit of convincing as to why. So we had also put it in this way, that if you want a certain promotion in the company, then you must have gone through a few changes before you reach that level. So now everyone understands that yes, this is for his good.
Job rotation is...
So it's it's thing
that's also embedded in the policy systems so that it becomes
absolutely
institutionalized. Yeah, very, very interesting. The other thing that I see in companies is the dearth of engineering talent. I mean, there's a huge paradox that India is producing so many engineers, but when you go to these companies, they're saying, okay, talent is not there, I'm not able to hire. And L&T being such a big company, then your need for engineers is much more than any other of these small companies. So how did you manage this talent scarcity?
Actually, this whole thing
and
is
the abundance facing the same time?
It's a pity. I think India produces about 1.2 million engineers per year. Now this is far higher, in fact almost twice what China produces. Okay?
Wow.
Twice. The number of patents that we have are about 1 lakh. China is at 16 lakh. You see the difference? So numbers are there. Where is the innovation in terms of originality and so on? Now these numbers give you a certain message. Of course, reasons one can go into, and I'm not blaming any situation, but you must recognize this is where we are. So obviously there are education problems and how the thing is grown and what we consider as an engineer and what a German maybe an engineer. It's totally a different kind of a thing. So we have in numbers, huge numbers. And we still find, as per latest statistics, 45% are just suitable for employment, even in India, and the rest of them are not. So this disparity is the real killer. And whether you like it or not, all companies of repute have to sort of invest a lot in sort of retraining people for use of the job. I mean, I say that I used to be an engineer in 1968, but at that time also what we learned in colleges and what we actually have to do is quite different. So we have to do that investment. Having done that, now unless you give those people exciting things to do, they're not going to stick around. Right? And so fortunately for us, because of all the things that I mentioned, we had a lot of excitement. I mean, I still feel I can learn so much from what is happening today. So people have developed things that we started in such a beautiful manner that they're doing things which are very much more challenging. So I'm saying that when there's excitement, then the right people stick.
Yeah, and particularly the engineers who have passion for engineering and the opportunities that got created because of all the things that we discussed, that creates even a learning ground. It's like, okay, saying I don't depend on the education system. My company is is where people can learn and become better.
The other thing which sadly is missing is this churn between academia and industry.
Yeah. Can you elaborate more on the need for collaboration between the academic and the industry?
See, collaboration has two parts. One is that an industry gives a certain project to academia, they deal with it, and so that's also collaboration. But what I am talking about is something a little different. What happens typically in an industry, that people who have to tackle day-to-day problems and get stuck here or there, their theoretical knowledge keeps on, I would say, rusting, whatever it is. So they knew things in the past, but they don't know what's happening today in India and outside. Look at the academia. I mean, they've got brilliant people who have done research in various fields, and they are absolutely up to date in their knowledge. But they have no clue as to what are the practical requirements in industry. So this is a sad story, and all successful countries, if you look at, they have succeeded by having a very intimate kind of a relationship between the academia and people on the shop floor, workmen or whatever it is. Now, how is that to change? So one of the suggestions which at least I have been voicing earlier, and it's good that there are some signs of change, that a person who has been maybe an engineer, maybe a metallurgist or whatever it is, or could be a specialist in other areas, production engineer, he has spent his life in sort of solving problems on the day-to-day. But he has no clue as to what are the theoretical aspects of what he's doing. And if you have a design engineer, he doesn't have a practical experience of the shop floor. So point is, you look at this as not a collaboration per se, but in a sense a rotation of it's a job rotation in a larger way,
of a different
where
kind,
a professor now, okay, he may be too senior depending on the age, assistant professor, whatever that is, I mean in his 40s or whatever, he or she wants to really become a better professor, and it should be necessary for that person to spend a couple of years in some industry. Vice versa, the person on the shop floor or maybe even in the offices, procurement for example, he or she will be far better if they have got some exposure to actually teaching students. Because they say the best way of learning is teaching. So they would prepare themselves better, and when they come back, you imagine the kind of input that they would have. Now this is something which of course is easier said than done, because there are so many other issues, but I am glad that there is a trend towards this, because the AICT, that is the basic people who will look at technical education, they have also recognized it, and some things are happening. Far more has to be done. But this is something not exactly collaboration in that sense, but it is a kind of a
is that job rotation of a different kind, where as you're picking up from that idea of the metallurgist becoming a very good
exactly. And that will improve education also, because when the same professor or whoever it is goes back to his classroom, he will impart a different kind of knowledge. He will accept skill training much better, the learning by doing, as they say. All that can happen, and that will improve the entire system.
But for the individual companies, I think the big takeaway, as I see here, is this thing of job rotation, and then giving, particularly for the designers, create those new opportunities where they're thinking about newer technologies, applications. I think that itself becomes a training ground, so that you yourself are creating this, you're like a center which creates knowledge in itself. I think that becomes an attraction for even the best of talent. People who are passionate about engineering will always love to be in such organizations.
One other thing which is important is, even if you don't have this level of job rotation between academia and industry, you should have sessions. We used to call it Guru Speak sessions, where a whole lot of people used to gather, and who would talk to them? Maybe a person who is a scientist who has achieved great things in the aerospace industry. Most of the people may not be working in that industry at all, that particular time. But the person is talking about how things are developed. An ISRO guy will develop, or an atomic energy guy who has worked on various levels. So now what happens in that, people start thinking around different dimensions. We used to, in fact, I remember we called a person, a lady who had done a remarkable job in the famous DGFT, the DGS&D kind of thing, the old thing which became a problem, but she had really done a wonderful job in changing the outlook there. She came and gave a lecture to us who were engineers and who had nothing to do with financial policy or whatever, but it does change mindsets. And so this is another way you can have of churning the whole thing.
There's one more area which is where companies really struggle is in the area of contract management, where you have taken orders and then you're like a small player, then you found out that you're not making money, and then you say, okay, this is not the business I want to be in, and the promoter becomes very scared. So contract management is something that I think you laid a lot of stress in L&T. So could you talk about that?
See, contract management is a very large field. It starts with how the contract is written down. And whether there are legal experts who will look at the wording and all that, but basically you look at the intent of a contract. And if you look at the intent, if I am a customer and I'm giving a contract to any supplier or whatever it is, all I want is his product should come in time within whatever the agreed budget, and I'm happy. Quality, of course, to be bought. So what am I worried? After the contract is given, that should come on time. So delivery, quality. Now these are things that are important. Now, have I made a contract which actually builds in these factors? And I would say 99% of contracts, the traditional ways of doing things, I'll give you a concrete example where I myself have seen this problem. Typically in a contract, there is a clause that first some percent, maybe 10% is an advance given for the company to prepare itself. The second stage, the customer wants to ensure that you're not going to get paid unless you do something real. What is the real? Order the material. Material should be physically there. Then I'll give you the next. Sounds quite sensible. So like that, and there are stage payments. The next stage can be convert those plates into cylinders, so that you can join them up and make it. Sounds again quite reasonable. Now you look at it from the flow of the project itself. So I know very clearly, I can still remember that at once I found a shop floor full of plates. Okay, it was fully plates. So I asked the guy, what are you people doing? Why are you? No, because stage payment is the material has to arrive. Arrival of a material for the customer is only proved by having a third party coming and inspecting and clearing that this material has come. Otherwise I can get any plate. So third party inspection. So I spread out all the plates, third party is coming. So he'll stamp all the plates and then I'll get the stage payment. Now how can I say no to that, because that's the part of his contract. Similarly, another case which happened to be for a very, very important project, the stage payment was because that was free issue material, so converted into cylinders and whole place is full of cylinders. So huge payment involved. So again, what has gone wrong here? If the stage payments are linked to progress, the real progress of a project, it will not link to all material. It will say the critical materials of so and so type must be available. It will not say all cylinders. The cylinder is the most sort of vital section which decides the duration of the project. Yeah. Now, so this contract is written down in a way which does not help the project. It neither helps the customer, because how does he gain? Just because he has signed off the money, the project has not moved. So tying up the contract terms with this is quite important.
So basically you're saying that look at the flow of the project and build. So proactively doing it, and I think that's the big deal, because if somebody is saying that I'm going to give you money on buying material, that's the easiest thing to do and grab it.
Exactly.
But that creates, I think, disharmony, conflict, not only for yourself but also between you and the customers, and then aligning them for the flow of the project. So contract management is all about, as you're pointing out here, it's not about, okay, one part is how do I protect myself. The other is going out of the way and saying what is the right for the customer, and then to build that, and that's when customer sees you in a different light. Very, very interesting.
And the other part is how we as manufacturers impress a customer. Now this applies across the board to construction contracts, buildings and all that. So for example, you have taken a contract for maybe a certain project and the customer comes on a visit. How do I impress him? I must show that I'm very serious about the job, which means what? The customer wants to see a lot of people on the job. How do I put maximum people on the job? The critical things are still far away because I am not ready. Design has to be done something. So the low-hanging fruit, things which I can release, I release to the shop. So there's 50, 60 people working feverishly on the job. Customer come, fantastic. This company is really serious. In fact, I remember that statement which says you should never start any project as early as possible, which sounds absurd, but it is true. We should do a lot of thinking before you start. And doesn't matter if nobody on the job and maybe in the design office somewhere. So that's the other part of contract management. And the third part is how much of the project is complete. There again, huge problems. In a complex project, how do you see the traditional way is S-curve. As you were just pointing out, it is very easy to collect points for the S-curve because it is not related to flow.
Yeah.
So you can plot those points and show in big presentation that on the S-curve.
No real progress. Yeah.
And traditionally what happens when you come to the end, that 90-95%, it drags on as almost a parallel line, never gets completed. So the point is that S-curves and all that are things of the past. If you don't, understand these points and implement them, you are going to continue with this mess.
You raised a point that we need to start exporting as a company because that's where the real learning is, where you're exposed to the best in the world, and that's where a company starts becoming world class, and that's when the things open up in a big way for company rather than staying within the country. So it's a deliberate decision to do exports. Now, what are the key learnings from, let's say, the countries that are known for engineering? Like Germany, Japan, right? What are your learnings from these countries?
Okay, so I fully substantiate the fact that you have to export if you want to understand where you stand. Okay, having said that, there are a lot of learnings from both Germany for the kind of depth that they go into, the precision that they apply in not only the design but also the manufacturing, and very methodical approach. So that's something to learn. From Japan, you learn something in addition to that, and that is something to do with involvement of people in decision making and aesthetics of a product. I remember the days when India opened up 1991 and all that, and we started stepping into exports. We were also part of the same group which was saying, oh, but it is too early and we will collapse, etc. We passed through tough times, but we learned very fast. And what did we learn? That in L&T, we of course lay a lot of emphasis on quality as we understood it then, the sticking to compliance to standards and so on. So our products were functionally always quite good, reliable. You will rarely come across a product supplied by which fails because of this. So functional aspect we used to concentrate upon. The Japanese product, if you look at neighboring us, and we had an occasion where we had supplied some columns and there was a Japanese thing, but when you look at it, you feel ashamed. The reason is not because it will functionally be bad, but it looks very bad. Typically, you take welds on a vessel. We learned that, okay, it should look good. So what did we start doing? These are all things which are part of our learning. We started saying every weld should be nicely polished. Grinding it. And then painting after that looks nice. But that is exactly different from what the Japanese do. They think if a weld is ground, which means the original weld was not so great. So the company has not understood the meanings of real quality. If a weld is left unground but still looks beautiful,
that's what you should try for.
That is quality. So essentially, these are the learnings which you get when you compare yourself as a total product. If you have just some tack welds on a vessel just to support a ladder, it's not a pressure vessel. Pressure vessel is beautifully designed, everything is fine. There are attachments. Attachments are the ones where it shows such poor quality when you compare. Now, look at the customer's view. He has got a choice. He doesn't have to come to India and to L&T or anybody else. So, when he looks at a product and he looks at, okay, these things are not done properly, the welds are not dressed properly or whatever, then what is the conclusion he will draw? I think that this lack of quality may have gone into the product itself. So, aesthetics, just like safety, if you have got a place where people are working safely, very few people on the job, but doing it systematically, you get a certain feeling of happiness that yes, this company understands and is professional, truly professional. Similarly, you get in the aesthetics, you feel that this is not a great company to deal with.
And those psychological factors matter, even though it's a engineering product, but you're saying
absolutely
the same psyche of consumer product applies here as well.
Same to, I don't know how many people know this, but when an Indian quotation is compared to a Japanese quotation or a German quotation by a customer, maybe a US company or whatever it is, you know what they do? They look at the money that people have quoted and they add to Indian quotation something called a soft cost, which we realize the hard way. Soft cost. Soft cost means that yes, you may have quoted say 10 crores for a particular equipment, but they'll have to spend a lot of time and money in following up,
So they add on to it.
They add to it the number of visits to make sure that things are going on time. So
and then compare.
Wow. And that soft cost is the cost of follow-up and the cost of his visits, number of visits he has to make sure that the project is going on time. Now, this is something which is not easily realized. So we think, okay, we are L1, so great. So the entire philosophy of we should get an order because we are lowest in cost is something which is completely to be removed from because we are a low-cost country, we have an advantage. We have a low-cost country, we have a big advantage, but it is how productive we are and the product that we finally produce, whether it gets acceptable the first time without follow-up, that is when we are competitive. There are several examples I can give where we were doing a vessel for a Japanese client, and that project was, I think, something like 27 months or something. It's a large project. And this whole thing was going on. A lot of complex work on it was going on. They sent one very young person to monitor the project. Now that person did not know anything of fabrication. He was young, fresh from college, but he was given the task of monitoring what's going on. What was he doing? He first used to go to the senior person who was doing the planning and said, can you tell me what is the plan for this? So obviously we were great at making plans. So he said, this is the way it is planned. I see. So you're going to finish on so and so date. Yes. Good. Now if you want to achieve this, please tell me how many people are to be put on the job for doing this, whatever you have said. He's not challenging anything. He's only taking what you said. And at the end of the day, no computers, nothing. He used to just add up physically checking how many people are working on that job. Because he had no knowledge of fabrication per se, but he used to just add up this. Then obviously 55 people you said will be there and there are only 43 today. Now you can't deny he's 43. He has got everything recorded. So he will ask a very polite question. He says, yeah, that's okay, but how will you make up? So the traditional Indian answer is, oh, don't worry. So somehow they don't accept. Somehow means how? So then we say, no, we'll change the sequence. Okay, what is the sequence? Another sequence. Like that, he used to drill down every day. And then he came to me after about 2 weeks or so. He was miserable. So, sir, I have to tell you, what is going on? He says, this job, this is what is the plan. And this is what I'm doing. Now, you can't find for that because the data has been given by. So I understood the problem. I tried to correct it, but it was already late. And that project, I remember 27 months ka project got delayed finally by 6 weeks or something. Now 6 weeks is like done thing in India, no? Kya farak padta hai? So this was over the project unhappily, but the project went on. 3 years after that, I happened to be visiting Singapore, discussing with an American company and for a new order. So they said, I gave all the things, this is our facility, this is what it is. I said, very good, very good. Did you supply something to this Japanese company? So he said, yeah, long back. Oh, I see, okay. Was there a delay in the project? So I said, yeah, there was some, but it was a big project and a complex. I see, I see. He only smiled and said, remember, Japanese have long memories. And we didn't get that order because we had delayed that by 6 weeks in a 27-month kind of. So point is, these things are important to register permanently and we don't realize. So what I'm coming to is that we don't realize how much companies are losing because of delays, how much customers are losing, and today in India, how much India is losing because of project delays. So, I mean, it's like saying, I have a great ambition, a great vision, and I say I'm releasing orders worth, say, 2 lakh crores. I mean, it's quite, these numbers are there, infrastructure projects are huge. So it's greatly announced, applauded and all that. When do I actually celebrate that? When a tunnel, a bridge, a tower gets erected or something, we say, fantastic feat.
It's done.
India is done. So very good. To be appreciated, nothing wrong with it. How much was the delay in that project? Now, the cost of time is something so vital, and which is a tragedy, because in our sort of psyche, it has not yet gone that time is money. Only people, some clients realize it and they really succeed. But most people, it's taken for granted. And especially government projects.
And if you are exporting as a company, you said, okay, do exports. But if you are exporting and you have people like that who are adding cost of doing the soft cost that you're saying, that means they understand, they know the damage that you're going to create to me. So delivery is definitely
one of the key factors.
One of the things that, okay, you can't get away, particularly if you're supplying to the big developed countries.
Yeah, and finally that's what we want to be, you know. We don't want to continue to supply to our neighbor or whatever is in India, and he's satisfied, we are satisfied, both of us are making a mess, but how will we grow out of it? It's only when you compare yourself with best in class. This thing about delays, I just want to give you an example. There was a very large project. There were some, I don't remember the number, 15, 20 very huge reactors. Not reactors, they were basically large heat exchangers, each weighing about 2,000 tons and so on. Now, no single company could actually meet the requirements of the project. So the client said, you can join up and quote. So we had collaborated at that time along with a German company, quite a well-established company in that domain. So we said, we'll both do part here, part there and supply. They said, fine. So their person had come to India to discuss, and of course he was happy with our facilities, there's nothing wrong. And then I asked him a very basic question. I said, see, we are signing off this agreement, but what happens if there's a delay? Who is responsible? You have done part, we have done part, and I think it was a 2,000 crore kind of a program. So if there's a problem, a huge penalty will be there. Who shares? How do we share penalty? So he asked a very simple question. He says, but why delay? So then I gave him the typical Indian story. No, we have got, you have to order material and it gets delayed and this and that. He heard everything. But why delay? So I got irritated, but I said, do you mean to say you have never had delay? No, we don't have delay. Why should there be a delay? Why liquidate? See, liquidate damages is a clause which is there. He could not fathom why this whole thing is a worry at all. So anyway, it so happened that the entire big program got postponed or cancelled, whatever it is, because of it was something I think in Kuwait or Qatar, one of them. So that whole project got cancelled. So we didn't go through the experience of actually doing it. But I was keen on knowing how this company, whether he has just pulled a fast one. So I made it a point, whenever I got a chance, to send one of my people to that company. In a way, they are competitors, but at least there was an open relationship. So, and he literally went through 10 or 15-year record, and not a single order had ever got delayed.
Wow.
Okay, so now that becomes a benchmark. Someone somewhere has achieved even in our kind of business. So when we did this exercise, even at Hazira, earlier or the percentage of orders which just go on time, that's where we developed a delivery index. Apart from quality and cost index, we had a delivery index. And that is something which helped us look at ourselves. Forget about what, finally the customer, because of relationship or because of no alternative, he may accept a delay. But internally we must be clear, we had promised this on day one, where we actually delivered, how many days of delay out of total. And we were quite bad in that. But I must say, with all these improvements systematically worked on, we have crossed with 90%, 95%. Things are going on time.
That's very interesting, because many of these companies, when we start work and we do a lot of this work in operations, So we asked them, what's the delivery performance? And the typical answer is, okay, we haven't paid LD, so most probably we are on time. And it's because you find out they're not measuring it per se the way it has to be. It is based on revised date, give allowance of 1 month here and there, not even tracking it. And to see that number in the face and
absolutely
is very critical.
See, one common thing which, at least this is my observation, maybe you'll agree with it or not. One of the major, I would say, blocks to improvement is to say that we are special or we are different.
We are unique.
We are unique, we are different. When I gave this example, Germany is different, that trains come on time or used to come on time, and so nothing works in India. But these are all excuses if you really analyze. A lot of them, we have certain advantages they don't have, but whether it is right or wrong, you have promised something. Yeah. That whole thing has to be something which I have said to somebody that I have finished this in so many months or so many years or whatever it is. That's all that should make you drive. That yes, I have to meet my commitment, nothing else. And if you have that policy, these changes and this processes which the TOC-based things also help a lot in achieving things on time.
That also helps companies in the working capital problems that they face. Suddenly you have too many jobs open in the shop floor, nothing going out, and then you're struggling with working capital. So not only you are being delivery focused, but you are also ensuring that you don't get into this working capital. L&T was lucky the fact that they have a larger conglomerate, but for these small companies, they have no option but to ensure that the operations are smooth.
Why L&T faces huge problems because of such things? You take a case of a contract for defense. If you produce a system, a weapon system, the clause simply is the last 10 or 15% will not be paid when it's out of the gate. It will be paid when it is accepted by them. Now that you lose control, because the system which, let's say a tank you're producing, it has to be accepted, so they have to have the capacity to test. That maybe the testing facility is not available that year. The whole thing gets delayed 1 year, and it goes on. So you don't have control, but these are facts of life. So now taking that advantage there and say, oh, it doesn't matter to the client, so let me delay, is a suicidal thing. As you rightly said, it actually impacts the company itself. So this is not unfortunately realized. You take huge infrastructure projects, you know what is done. You celebrate what is done and achieved. You don't know when it was actually promised and how late or early it is. That's the tragedy.
Yeah, project ultimately gets completed, but that's not the celebration point.
I would like to get a research done on this, but I'm telling you, a country is losing lakhs of crores, not 1 or 2 crores, just because of delays. You're not able to plan your budgets, then it rolls over, the next one comes, and then you don't have enough money, so you do some, because you have to declare new projects. It's glamorous to address that. But these existing projects, they are a big drain. So it's all over.
So there's one more thing that is close to your heart is about safety, and then you keep on talking about it. And when you look at these companies, safety is okay. We have to have safe practices. But excellence in safety, why that is a critical need to becoming big?
See, it depends on how you look at safety. If you look at safety as something to be done because it's compelled by compliance, laws or whatever it is, or by a customer, then you are external to it. And therefore you do something to show this. But I want to give you some examples. See, for example, we were doing some work for, again, one of the large client, and we knew that this person, the helm of affairs, was very conscious about safety, as we understood it. So basically, when I was taking through the workshop, he suddenly stopped and said, wait, hold on, see what's happening there. So I saw a person carrying, he was basically having a trolley on which some machining swath was there. And he was wearing his helmet and all that, and he was moving. So gloves also he was wearing, so there's a critical thing. So I said, yeah, but he's wearing, no, but he's not wearing goggles. What else do you tell him? I said, no, sorry, we made a mistake, we'll correct it next time. Yeah, okay, but I'm waiting. He refused to step further. Said, yeah, I'll get it done. No, please do it now. So he told us later on that in his company's policy, if there's an unsafe condition seen or something happening, if at all feasible, it should be corrected before you move ahead.
Oh, do it now.
Yeah, because it is seen, so it is something. So one learning. I gave you the other example of the Singapore part. So, and then when you visit, we got a very interesting order from ExxonMobil, which at that time used to be the world's largest company, for a refinery in Southampton. And they had a very crucial thing to do. Their main reactor, which was asbestos insulated, had to be changed because asbestos is banned, as you know. So that reactor in that operating plant had to be changed. And it's a very large reactor, which we were able to even dispatch. We have got coastal facilities, so we can dispatch any size, but they were not able to put it in the refinery. So we had to necessarily send it in pieces, erect a whole steel flyover on which those pieces were put there and in position to do the welding. So obviously, operating refinery, safety is everything. So I had gone to visit that plant before executing this order, just to understand what the requirement was. And the first thing we were told is you sit in this office, and I was given a lot of videos and all that on safety. And they even gave a kit, I remember, which, I said, what is this for? Apart from the goggles and all that is commonplace. No, there are some compounds, like if you are crossing and if there is a sulfur leak, then what do you do? So this compound you use and all that kind of thing. So I was carrying all that, looking like a spaceman going inside that factory. But I found the whole thing a little overdone, But of course, everything was over. Now we got that order, and those people came to Hazira at that time to discuss and big things different from what we were facing with Indian customers. That's why the learnings, you have to go abroad. They said, look, now we have given you the order. So, but now you're our partners. Forget about the role that you're a supplier and we are a customer. Because if you don't succeed, our project fails. So we want you to succeed. And that is when we had something called an alignment meeting, which was a learning for me. Alignment meeting is that customer, when he comes to India for this order, like it is the only Indian company L&T was selected, and we had got the order for them, unfortunately, but whatever it is. Having said that, they said, okay, on the board, I will write down what my concerns are. His team was there, so each person added on points, whether it's timeliness or quality of drawings or whatever it is, all those. And then we had some concerns also, that how long will it take to approve drawings and what are there. So we wrote down. Now these are the 2 concern points. So they said for each of them, we will discuss and arrive at action points to close those. Okay. So this was one learning. Second is they addressed we had called the workmen as well as staff and all that. It was a prestigious order. So then they elaborated what is their philosophy in their company. Now ExxonMobil is what? It was a petrochemicals and oil and gas company.
Safety is a very
Safety
big thing.
is a number 1 priority. Second is cost, and second is delivery, and then is cost. That is safety, quality, and cost. In that priority for the organization as a whole. Another learning, because for us, if you ask what is the topmost, okay, profit, that cost will be high in our kind of thing. No, safety is highest. And a beautiful way of how ExxonMobil monitors safety, very interesting. Actually, what they do is their process is very complex, but they take the end point where the water is going out after going through this process. The water is, and then in that, they showed a slide. There are some tadpoles, okay? If tadpoles can live happily in the effluents, the whole process has worked. So how much there is impact and emphasis on safety. DuPont is an organization which is the world leader in safety, if you ask me. They have operations in more than 100 countries. They make some of the most hazardous chemicals. But I was shocked in a way to know that they don't insure any of their plants. They said, why should we insure a plant? Spend that money in improving safety standards. I mean, these are learnings. And then they have something called behavior-based safety. Safety is not, you can't dictate it. You have to behave in a way which will give a message to your organization. And the top people have to behave that way. So in that one American company, any meeting begins with something on safety in the morning. First meeting, and it's something may not be in the plant. If I'm coming to a plant, like I've come here and I've found that traffic is terrible and one fellow almost got killed, I talk about it. So remaining people get that message that safety is.
Safety is first before the business review
Yes.
starts.
When one walks through the shops, typically what happens is the owner, the big boss, he asks, why is this not going on time? Why is that? That's product knowledge. But suppose he or she asks the same question, that why is this wire hanging loose and why that is, so the focus is different. So when doing that, we started imbibing those things, learning from it, and we did make a significant improvement in safety.
Interesting. Great. Any closing thoughts on the topic?
No, basically, I think as far as potential goes, India has huge potential purely because we are a much younger country to even compare to China or whatever it is. And of course, I have always believed that our mental capabilities are matching others, sometimes more or less, whatever it is, but we are equal to the best. There's nothing lacking in mental capability.
Interesting. So this was in fact almost like a master class for the companies. We covered all aspects of management, right from strategy, how do you get out from one product, move to the other product, the adjacencies that you talked about. We talked about how it is important to relearn by doing exports. We talked about how do we do productivity and lead time jumps, and that is required because when you get into this kind of a industry, there will be these product categories where eventually it will be non-competitive. How to do that? How do you groom a management layer? How do you solve the problem of the dearth of engineers?
But just one thing I thought I should mention. See, these are all things of the past. I am an ancient engineer. I don't know many of the things which are happening, but I do find that there is surprisingly high level of complacency in anticipating what's likely to come ahead of us. I mean, I've been doing a little reading on these subjects. Not that I understand the exact nitty-gritty of it, but there's a complete, it's a tsunami which is going to be hitting us very, very soon, in the lifetimes at least of our next generation. And I feel that we are not, because we are not realized it, we are not preparing ourselves enough. The kind of things which have happened, yes, they are important to be absorbed. I mean, you take the number of engineers we are producing, if we don't equip them with the right kind of at least mental aptitudes for absorbing what is AI and what is quantum computing and all kinds of things, or materials, and I mean synthetic biology is going to hit us like anything. So AI and synthetic biology are some of the biggest, they could be existential threats. If we don't do anything about them, whole thing. So there is a whole lot of strategic thinking required in those directions, and a change in pattern, not only in education but in industry, in academia. Everything has to go through a sea change, and there having a lot of young people who are technically trained, maybe in the era of the past, but they are a valuable resource and they can absorb things. So I'm confident that that is our strength, but provided we use it that way.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kotwal, for this 2-hour discussion. I think our audience will find it very interesting, and they would have queries as such. So if you want to write to us, please do so at vcg@vectorconsulting.in, and we would love to reply back. Thank you so much.